Here's to the crazy ones. The misfits. The rebels. The troublemakers. The round pegs in the square holes. The ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. But the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Hey guys, Mark Mandel here. Welcome to the latest episode of Customer Experience Under the Hood. Thanks for coming on this journey. I'm so glad that you're here with me. Today we're going to have a really good conversation, and I want to give you a little bit of a game plan of what we're going to cover for the next 40 or 45 minutes that we're together today. You already know about this show, CX Under the Hood. You've been here in past months where you've understood that this is the show that allows us to get together and really kind of geek out on some deep topic in the world of customer experience work and insight work that we all do and we all love. This is no exception to that. This is going to be an episode where we get to really roll up our sleeves, at least metaphorically, and dig into a big topic, which we'll revisit in a couple of minutes. But before we do that, I wanted to take just a few minutes. If you missed the last episode of this particular show, the Under the Hood show that I do, I wanted to talk about it because I think it's a pretty important episode. I had the opportunity to sit down with a partner and friend of mine. His name is Mark also, so easy to remember the name Mark. He works at a company called OGC Global. And Mark has written this white paper about creating a linkage model between customer experience metrics and financial outcomes. And he was able to help all sorts of companies figure out a way to model and to better articulate the financial impact of customer experience, because we're all being asked about that. I know that's the case. That paper is awesome. I think he did a masterful job of writing that paper. And if you'd like to see a copy of it, do me a favor, ping me here as in the comments on the screen, or just send me a note and say, I want to get a copy of the ROI paper, and I'll make sure that you get a copy of that. It came out really, really well. I have some big housekeeping things to talk about while we're together here today. The first one is you guys who have been following this show or my other shows that I've been doing, you know that a lot of them are just me sitting here talking about things that I think are important, hopefully to us both. And today I have a special opportunity to bring on a dear friend of mine named Michael Allenson. Michael's going to join me in just a second here. And Michael and I are going to co-host this episode together. But before we bring on Michael, I'll need to tell you a little bit about this guy, Michael. Michael and I used to work together a bazillion years ago at a company that used to be called Maritz CX. Now it's part of the InMoment family of companies. And Michael and I got to know each other by doing a lot of collaborative work together. We went out to Vancouver to do a journey mapping program for a client out there. And I just, love working with Michael. When I went out on my own almost a year ago, Michael was similarly out on his own. And we said, let's link up together and work on some projects together. We've done that now a few times, and I've really been happy with the result of Michael and I and how we can collaborate and create value for people together. Michael's one of the good guys out there. So without further ado, let me bring Michael on and give him a chance to introduce himself. Actually, Michael, let me make you bigger here. There you are. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Mark.
Thanks for hanging out, man. Good to be here with you.
Thanks for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
I did my best to do a little bit of an intro for you a moment ago, talking about how we first hooked up with the old company and where we are now. But I would love for you to take just a couple of minutes and just kind of talk about you and the work that you do and why it's important, just so people know who you are.
Yeah, appreciate that, Mark. So given what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to go all the way back because I actually started life in my career as a market researcher. I spent the first 12 years of my career at a very strategic market research house. We did a lot of marketing strategy, and back in those days, we called it customer satisfaction work, and all of those things. And we're going to talk today a little bit about the intersection between customer experience and market research. And I've got both of those in spades in my career, because while we joined together at Merit CX, when Merit's Research bought Allegiance, I had already been at Merit's Research for 8 years before we did that merger. So I did my first 12 years in market research. I've done some time in consulting, and I did 10 years with Merit CX.
When you said, Michael, that you were going to go way back, I was afraid you were going to tell me that you were born in Chicago and raised in this neighborhood.
People don't know, but I was born in the mountains of Georgia somehow.
Even I didn't know that about you. That's pretty cool. So, but now you're a Chicago guy.
I'm a Chicago guy, came here for school at University of Chicago and never left. But, one thing that's really important about me is, when I was at Merit's, and, I had co-authored our very first customer experience maturity framework. And we always talked about, at Merit's, we were about measurement and management. And back in those days, and probably still to a great extent today, it was really mostly measurement. There wasn't a lot of management. And I've really been focused in these last couple of years on how do we connect the dots between, what we know to be true, that by improving customer experiences, we are going to grow the business. And somehow companies don't adopt a lot of the insight that we gather. So my focus has really been on how do we connect those dots? How do we become truly customer-centric organizations where what we learn in customer experience becomes the rudder for what we do? And so that's kind of where I'm at.
That's pretty cool. You're mentioning obviously your long background in both CX, but also research and insights. One of the things that a lot of CX folks run into, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Michael, about this, is surveys, they say, are getting harder and harder and harder to get completed by people. And, yet we continue to seemingly punish our customers and the market with our surveys, both in their design and in their scope and level of effort that it will take to really complete one. I can't tell you how many times that what started out as a perfectly innocent survey, they kind of build these things now by consensus in these companies. And before you know it, they've added another 28 questions to that little survey. And now it's going to be a 20-minute or 30-minute survey. They go, wait a minute, and you wonder why nobody's completing it anymore. And what can we do about that? And so I wanted to pick your brain, Michael, before we bring our guest on the line here, about ways that we can either learn about people, and I want to use a really important word here, behaviorally, without having to take the effort and time to rely exclusively on the survey as the means of learning.
Yep.
And what other ways can we learn? What have you seen, Michael, in the space? What are you hearing in your daily life these days?
Well, it's really interesting because you're right. Surveys have, in many ways, become a bad word. Most people don't like doing surveys. They will do surveys. Some people will. And we are never going to get away from the fact that it's important to ask customers what they think. But do we still need to try to do a census every time we do a survey of a transaction where we try to interview everybody? Or, and we have in our customer journeys, we have so many touch points, so many places where we'd like to learn stuff. And we all know it's hard enough to get feedback on one transaction or one part of the journey, much less all. And where I see things evolving is that the ability to use modeling to project where people are and what people need to do. And that comes from a combination of having some of that behavioral and transactional information and having enough survey data that you can model effectively where people are. And importantly, by combining that with the other information, know what to do about it, know how to take action, know how to be precise with the action you take based on what you're learning about those customers. And I think it's really interesting. We're almost coming full circle right now. If you had gone back 20 years ago, almost every customer experience program was owned by a market research leader. It was a customer satisfaction program owned by a market research leader in a company.
Mm-hmm.
And about 10 to 15 years ago, that started to shift, where it was moving very heavily into an operations leadership role. And it really was focused on, in the NPS parlance, the inner loop activities, the customer recovery. So it went from, in market research, where it was sampling customers and getting scores and seeing how we're doing, to understanding exactly where every person is that we can talk to so that we can recover those who've had a bad experience.
Yep.
I'll leave the outer loop to the side.
Sure.
We are now coming full circle in that we actually probably don't need to try to survey everybody to know who's in trouble. We need to sample customers in our customer experience space and use models to understand where everybody is. And it's a way we can fill in the entire journey in terms of the understanding.
Interesting. That's I think, such a spot on point of view. Although, for the record, I'm the guy who still takes surveys. You know, for whatever reason, maybe because I'm a survey.
I still take them too, and I don't know if it's because I want to give the feedback or see how good or bad their survey is.
I want to see how bad they are. That's why I do them. I want to see just how much of a glutton for punishment they think their customers and the market are. You know, one of the things I think a lot about, I'm a movie guy. I love movies. And one of the movies that is a favorite of mine, have you ever seen the Jim Carrey movie called The Truman Show?
Yes.
You know, it's where he thought he was like being watched by some bigger force out there somewhere. Well, it's one of my favorites. I can't give you any reason why other than I'm a Jim Carrey fan, but I can tell you that The Truman Show is an interesting movie, and it surfaces some very interesting questions around observation and kind of surveillance and kind of being watched. And I want to bring this now, kind of, to using your term, Michael, full circle back into the world of insight and research. And to me, it might be an interesting consideration. I want to dig into this book with you for a second, and then for the next 20 or so minutes with our guest Andrew, when he pops in here, is this idea of observing your customers in their daily lives. What path brought them to your company or to your brand or to your product or service? Where do they go after your brand? And get the ability to understand these behaviors. A day in the life of Michael Allenson. How does Michael spend his time? You know, what brands appear to be important to your life? Or folks that look like you, using your point, we can model what, in some ways, you know, who you are based on putting you into a segment or behavioral category. And wouldn't it be interesting to be able to now, if I'm a CX guy, start to layer in a real deeper understanding of my market and the people we're servicing by understanding this kind of rich behavioral data as another layer of this sort of club sandwich of information, if you will, on top of the attitudinal data that I think is important, that we've already become familiar with. I mean, obviously, we all have lived and died by surveys for decades. And in some ways, that's cornerstone for us. Even if it's falling out of favor, it's still cornerstone. And the question is, what more can we get when you start to layer in some other rich information, like how do these people spend their day? What can we learn by watching them or by following the breadcrumbs in their day? And there's so much goodness to be said, I think, for that. What I'd love to do is dig into that idea of behavior, customer behavior, and what can we learn from that by introducing Andrew in a second here from Qrious Insight. Andrew started out as a stranger to me just a few months ago. He was introduced to me by a guy I used to work with, who I think of as a friend, who said, "You got to meet Andrew. Andrew's the guy." And that how Andrew has all figured out about layering in this rich behavioral information now on top of what we've already seen. I met Andrew, and my head did like a 360. I was like, "Really? I had no idea, that this is even possible." And I want to have Andrew come in here and kind of tell the story of what it is that I heard, because, guys, you got to hear this story. I mean, it's just such a compelling story. So, Andrew, hey, thanks for hanging out with us here.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Michael.
Hey there.
So,
Good to see
Andrew,
you.
I was just mentioning how you and I got introduced just a few months ago, and how you came along into my life and told me the story of what your company Qrious Insight's about. But it dawns on me that the things that you do are so different than what other people do in terms of this type of research. I would love to just ask you to take a few minutes and introduce yourself, tell the story of kind of Qrious Insight. What are you setting out to do? And just tell the story so other people can understand what it is that you're up to.
Cool. Thanks, Mark, and thanks for having me on the show.
You bet.
Hey, everyone. I'm Andrew Moffatt, CEO of Qrious Insight, one of the co-founders, and spent most of my career at a company now called Dynata, which I'm sure a lot of folks have heard about. I spent 18 and a half years at Dynata, was on the SSI side of the business, was on their executive team, and for the last 7 or 8 years that I was there, managed our global relationship with Nielsen. So I had the wonderful pleasure of basically doing data collection in almost every country in the world, moving work offline to online environments in random places across Latin America and Asia, and building capacity to support Nielsen kind of moving work online in those markets. And as we did a good job with that, we moved into basically building in all senses. So from recruitment and technology and people, helping Nielsen build their measurement panels as an outsourced provider. So things like Nielsen Home Scan or Circana's asset, where people scan their groceries, or Nielsen Net Ratings or online, which tells people what people are doing online, or Nielsen Mobile, which tells people what people are doing on mobile, all passively. Is what I used to do, and as I was coming out of the world of SSI, was becoming Dynata. We've seen a lot change in terms of what I would call like the supply side of the market research ecosystem. It's got its challenges, as you've alluded to earlier. A lot of fraud, a lot of really requiring a lot of data cleaning to get to good outcomes at the end of the day. It's probably less prevalent in CX because you have real customers that you're dealing with. But in our world, it was the issues that we're seeing today existed 8 years ago when I was still at Dynata, and we took a different view of the world, which you kind of alluded to a little earlier, which is like, how can we take what I grew to learn, which is like the best type of data that exists. So passively observed behavioral data, understanding what people are doing without asking them questions, and how can we scale that model to be used by companies other than just the big organizations in the research space. So typically, these large passive behavioral data assets, you would think of companies like Nielsen or ComScore or Kantar or Ipsos as having capabilities of those kinds, but that's as far as it went. And so our mission was to see if we can make passive behavioral panels more ubiquitous, to the point where we could replace certain survey methodologies. And so two major challenges we ran into. One is getting enough people to be able to track and how you do that, and the other is how you make sense of the data really quickly. And both of those are super big challenges because to build scale, you need a lot of money. And to build understanding, you also need a lot of tech and data expertise to be able to make sense of the data that you're collecting. And so I'll talk about those in a little bit. But the major thing is that, like, we tried to basically move away from your survey as your primary way of collecting data to collecting data passively and then layering in a survey, so that you don't get rid of a survey. You just, like you said earlier, want to know what they think, what their attitudes about certain things are. You can't pick that stuff up passively, but what you can pick up passively is what they do and who they are as people. And that's what we've created, so that you can actually engage with people, ask them less questions, yet have this richness of information about who they are. What that looks like in practical terms is that we basically profile you as a person based on your actions and your behaviors, right? So in a CX or a survey world, you want to know their hobbies and interests. You ask them a set of questions to know if they're interested in golf or art or arts and crafts or whatever it might be. In our world, we look at the websites you go to and the apps that you're using and the products you're buying or the videos you're watching, and have that determine what kind of person you are. So we're able to profile you on hundreds of variables and understand your hobbies and interests, the media platforms that you're using, the streaming platforms that you engage with, the fast food brands, the retailers, what stage of life you're in, and have all that dynamically updated every day without having to ask you questions about who you are. And that's really fundamentally changed a lot about what you can bring to the table from a research perspective. Because
So
if I can show up with
would
900
it be
variables on who I am, then you don't have to ask those, right?
would it be fair to say that your world lives on this device here, and
Yeah,
you passively keep an eye on me through it? This is the portal to learning about my life and my preferences.
yeah. Primarily today, it is your mobile device.
That's what I'm asking.
We are expanding to desktop, probably in the back half of the year. But basically, everything you do is pretty much on this device to begin with, right? So
Yeah.
um, like, we're able to understand completely who you are as a person because we pick up about 20,000 pieces of information that you use this phone for every month, right? And
Wow.
so that those 20,000 of pieces of information become your profiling without having to ask you any questions, right? And so it allows you to have a lot more real estate if you do want to engage with these people in surveys, because you don't have to make sure they're the right audience to begin with, because you can behaviorally understand that they were engaged with your site or engaged with a competitor's site or app, for how long or what frequency. We can see all of that. And then it's about, asking questions that you don't know the answer to. If I can already tell you all of your hobbies and interests and your media habits and all these other things, you don't have to ask someone if they've used Facebook last week or last month or how much time, because I can tell you that passively without having to ask you.
Don't look me up in your account. You're gonna see a lot of embarrassing behaviors on my part, concerning the number
That's right.
of hours
think
a day I'm on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think how I look at it from a CX perspective a little bit is that, like, there's a couple of things you touched on. Like, one is, like, we can create a new type of first party data that's much richer than the first party data that you can collect today, right? So today you're collecting maybe name or email and some information behaviorally about what they're doing on your sites, right? And in a way, that's how survey panels are created today, right? You come in, you collect your name and address, and instead of tracking them on your site, which you might do, you're really just getting their willingness to take part in the survey and to be contacted to do that over and over again, right? In our world, we do the same thing, but instead of you coming in to join a panel to take a survey, we have you join a data panel where you share your data and get paid for that data. So essentially, you're paid every day for the data that you provide. If you're a brand, it can be tied to whatever your brand currency is or your loyalty program is. And again, you can create data that's very rich, right? In today, as a CX person, you're finding everyone that's on your own owned and operated properties. You're collecting information on them, and that's what your limits are. Whereas if we collect data from somebody, I'm collecting it from every single web page, every single app they're using, every single location they go to. And if it happens to be an Android device, I can also see things like where you're shopping at Walmart and Target and Amazon, what ads you're seeing, and how effective those ads are at engaging with your brand post exposure passively without asking any questions, and see what you're watching on YouTube and watching on TikTok and places like that. So when you think about things like consumer journeys and things that you referred to earlier, like we're able to passively see not just people interacting with your brand, but any brand in your category, give you real category understanding, path to purchase, or at least path to shopping if we don't capture purchase in some cases, and really give you a detailed step-by-step overview of what people are actually doing outside of your site in your category that are actually customers or potential customers that we can identify.
So is it safe to say that you can behaviorally recreate kind of a day in their life?
Yeah. Well, we see every single click, right? So I'll know you went from Facebook and then within Facebook saw certain content or saw certain ads, and then you went and used a certain website to get your news, or you watched a show on Netflix. We see all of that behavior in sequential order. And so you can take a group of people and look back, people that did a certain action, bought a certain product, and look back a week and see their whole journey in that past week, or you can make it the past hour and see everything they did within that time frame, for sure. Because
Michael,
everything, it's about longitudinal
Andrew, I'm
data
sorry.
and tracking. Yeah, just about tracking people longitudinally over time, and we've got super high retention rates because we pay people for their data, and so that's why you have limited gaps, because you see people continuously.
Yep, I could see that. Michael, when you and I were talking yesterday only about this, you used an idea that really resonated with me. You talked about building a customer or a market learning lab where you can experiment and do tests and all sorts of observational work that way. Can you unpack that for us a little bit here, the way what you were sharing with me yesterday in your thinking?
Yeah. So, as Andrew said, and I do want to stress it's opt-in what they're doing, right? And we all get sort of nervous when we hear how much people are watching, and maybe they don't know that there's 20,000 data points, but they know that we're tracking that you'd be tracking their data. But the interesting thing is that, being able to essentially recruit a subsample of your customer base into opting into this data and providing this data gives you an ability to do a myriad of sort of experiments. Like if you understand that you have a particular segment that, for instance, is somebody who's happy with you, but you're not getting as much business as you used to, and you're getting asked the question, well, what are they doing? They're still promoters, but they're spending less.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have this information, you can start digging into this and seeing for those people who are promoters that are not spending, where are they going? What are they doing? What could we do to win some of their business back? Or maybe they've moved to some substitute category, and maybe we can win them back that way. And so it gives you a lot of answers to what does this mean when we see this result with this set of customers? And as we increasingly are being challenged by management to get from and I hate this word every time it comes up, actionable insight, because we are swimming in actionable insights. It's all about the action. And so this information can really help you understand, how do I take that insight I have and move it into a strategy for improving the performance of relationships, both the sentiment and what they deliver to the company.
Interesting. Andrew, let me go back to something you and I spoke about in a call yesterday as well. I'm thinking, putting myself in the shoes of a CX person, because a lot of folks who listen to this show are clearly CX people.
Yeah.
And we want to answer the question of, okay, well, I'm a CX guy. I live and die by my world are people called customers. And I want to be able to link up customer to what we're talking about here. And one of the things we talked about yesterday is this idea. Imagine running, let's just pick something as vanilla as an NPS survey, right? And, people will self-select promoter, passive detractor as part of that survey, let's say. And let's just say, for argument's sake, I self-select, I'm a high-scoring promoter. I'm a 10, right? So yes, I would absolutely recommend you to a friend or colleague. I can't imagine a higher score. Wouldn't it be interesting when the person finishes taking that survey with that self-selection in place, we pop a screen that just says, hey, we love the fact that you said, you'd recommend us. We got something for you. We got a VIP program that we could bring you into based on your high preference for us here. And part of that is we want to reward and compensate you to be part of this VIP program, or almost like an advisory board program. But it's going to mean you're going to need to opt in for us to work together on this, for us to be able to, for lack of a better term, keep an eye on you for a little while. And we'll compensate you for that, but it helps us understand one another at a different level. Is that how you see a good pathway for a CX or a customer experience person to think about this type of insight, is sort of an outgrowth or a next step when they've taken the survey and they've indicated a high preference for a brand, or a high brand affinity, or a high brand likelihood to recommend, to invite them into the fold a little bit, and invite them in to say, come on this journey with us a little bit. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's that you can create much richer first party data, and it's a great mechanism to do it because you've already got them engaged, at least in the survey process. As you mentioned, they're engaged, they're likely fans, or I don't know if you want to limit it to just those that are a 10. I think you can learn a lot from those that aren't 10s as well. And if you have a loyalty program in place, or something that's kind of nice to be able to give to people that are going to continue to participate other than cash, it'd probably work better, although cash works as well.
People like money.
People like money, yeah, but they like relevant money too, right? So if you're a Mileage Plus fan, you'll do stuff for Mileage Plus currency versus cash, right? So like tying it into the brand, I think, is also, as much as you can, important. But it comes back to the data that you're creating, right? And it's not just insights, right? It is every single click that they take outside of your owned and operated properties. So you'll get to see every interaction with that person, with any competitor, with anything product in your category, and see all of that passively. Again, you'll be able to get profiling dynamically on these people without ever having to ask them any questions, just based on their behaviors. You can see, their actual journeys and paths to doing certain tasks, and I think will open up a lot more insight for you to ask more questions of, and want to do more kind of CX, more targeted CX work too. I think, being able to trigger CX surveys based on certain behaviors happening every day, right? If there's certain types of audiences that you really want to dig in and learn more about, I think that's where the power of all this comes in. And our tagline is ask less, know more, right? And this whole concept of basically continually learning without having to engage with people and just rewarding them for their time and participation for sharing their data. I think it's important for people to understand that it's a very easy process, that once you agree to do this, it's very explicit. We're not like collecting data without people's consent or knowledge, right? It's
Yep.
very open. But it is one time that they have to click on, and it's like turning on location on an app on your phone. And once you do that, you're continually collecting data from that point on and passively. The other part also is that it can be integrated into your own apps. So it doesn't have to be within our apps. It can be still native within what you're doing. You just have to have the correct disclosures and
Yep.
opt-in processes in order to enable that to happen. But it can live and breed within your own environment, and we can really help, I think, augment your understanding of your customers. And I think the part that we haven't talked about is we can also help you really understand your competitors in a
I was
way
gonna ask
that
you
was
about
never possible before. Yeah.
That's
You
an
know,
important point. And, one of the things that we talked about was, it's one thing to know that, here's your score, here's your competitor's score. But when you start understanding your own customers and what their score is with you and what potentially what their score is with the competitors, and you can start understanding the dynamic of how they make decisions on where they go. So, I thought that was a really interesting potential application of it. And, as we've been talking, the other thing, and I'm curious if you've had anybody do this, Andrew, but, we've been talking about all this data, and, it strikes me also that it's got a lot of journey application as
Totally.
well, because, one of the things that I always challenge people I work with is, when you do journey maps, are you doing the journey map of your customer's journey with you, or the journey with what they're trying to accomplish? And having this data gives you kind of that outside view of what else they do surrounding your product.
Yeah.
And and I think, product innovation these days is, it's figuring out how your product can tentacle out from what you do. So it strikes me that that's a pretty interesting application too.
Yeah. Super interesting. Go ahead, Mark. I think you're trying to
I
say
was going to talk about that competitive angle for a minute because I think it's really cool. Like my wife and I don't have kids, but we have 3 dogs. We're very much a pet parent household here. And I can't tell you how much money we spend on dog food, dog treats, dog whatever for these 3 dogs of ours. And I think we're probably gold star customers of Chewy, but also a company called the Farmer's Dog. Because now we won't buy dog food, we buy dog health food, and it's better for our dogs, or so we're told. But if I'm Chewy, for example, I would love to know why or what brings me to Farmer's Dog. And if I'm Farmer's Dog, I want to know what brings me to Chewy as a kind of competitive, like a better term, wallet share exercise. Right? Am I giving the bad guys a big chunk of my money that could have gone to them? And what's my path that brought me to the other guy? So is it I shop at Chewy because I happen to also frequent, I don't know, pick another brand, pick it Apple as a brand. And for some reason, Chewy likes putting banner ads all over the Apple website. So I'm a heavy exposure to Chewy ads. And now that brings me to their product. Is that something that you could unlock for me so that I know not just when they come to behave with me, but how they behave with my competition?
Yeah, and how frequently, and depending on the site, we might actually be able to see what they're buying in those environments. So if they happen to buy products on their site, and the site allows us to look at, we grab a lot of data from the URL. So if the URL tells us what's going on, but we'll at a minimum be able to tell you you're there and how often you go there. If you're buying that product in Amazon, Walmart, Target, we'll see that as well. And give you a view as to, like, not just like their relationship with you, but you'll get to understand share of wallet, other types of products they're buying outside of Chewy, right? And what the opportunities are for product development. We are working with, some CPG companies who look at what we're doing as a way to potentially even revolutionize how they do insights themselves. Because in a way, once you have an asset, you can track all product buying or all category buying. So if you have different types of pet category products, like you can see a person engaging with all of those categories or all of the brands in those categories. So you might use Farmer for dog food, but you use Chewy for something else. You would be able to see all of that. But beyond that, you also see on an Android, at least, like all the advertising within social. So if Chewy happened to be advertising 5 times more frequently than Farmer's Dog, you'll see that, or vice versa, or how effective those ads are at driving actual engagement to those websites. You can see all of that passively as well. And like basically give you full view into not just ads, but then into media and what they're consuming and all of the influences and touch points along the way. Which kind of comes back again to the journey side that Michael was talking about. It's being able to see every single influence point along the way and go back and find purchasers or shoppers or people that bought both, and being able to understand them differently and create learning and understanding again without having to ask any questions within the audience.
So you're talking, you hit on something here that I had not considered before, and I want to run it by you.
Yeah.
You talk about looking at advertising exposure. And
Yeah.
to me, could this become sort of an upstream feeder source into kind of campaign optimization work and
Totally, yeah.
understanding, which ads are driving more, for lack of a better term, behavioral outcomes, or which ones are linking to me and my social peer group,
Totally.
that we more react favorably to one type of ad versus another type of ad, and tune up our ads that way?
Yeah, so we see ads on Android across all the major social platforms. So you have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, X, Snapchat. I think even LinkedIn is in there. And you can see how many ads we see per brand, right? So you can see who's advertising more. You can see exactly which platforms those ads are being showed up on. So if people are advertising more on TikTok, you'll see that versus on Facebook. You also see all the messaging that's being put out. So what captions, what offers, maybe you're getting free dog food promotions or a discount, you'll see that. And then we can passively see when you engage with the relevant ad, like maybe not with the ads, but I can say like within an hour you did this, within 2 hours, within 7 days or 30 days you did this,
Wow.
and look at your ads or someone else's ads. So you get the ability to look at your own ads, but also you can see the entire category level of ads because you have all brands, not just your own brand, where you need to have a media plan and a way to decode like what those ads are. We passively see all the ads within the device, so we don't need anything to decode anything. We don't need cookies or anything from a brand in order to see what's going on. So super powerful solution.
Are tracker cookies dying?
Cookies in general are dying, I think, and they almost died, but Google saves them. But I think it's a matter of time before that world has to move into more passive type solutions like this anyway, to try and get a more holistic view of what's going on.
There's one other thing, Mark, that occurred to me as we were talking here, because kind of a thing that I've been concerned about, and I bet there's a lot of people in the audience that are concerned about too, is there's been so much pressure by finance and ops to implement chatbots and to get rid of or really de-emphasize live service support and make it harder for customers. And I don't know if everybody feels this way, but I've talked to a lot of people in the CX space, and there's a lot of frustration that those things are being implemented before they're ready, and it's creating a lot of negative outcome.
Yep.
And it strikes me, and Andrew, you can confirm whether this is the case or not, but if you're tracking somebody that we've linked up, and they go to our website and we know they had a horrible experience, you could kind of track what do they do after they have that horrible experience. Because
Totally.
I'd love to know if after they had a horrible experience on my website, if I'm one phone provider, let's say, did they go to the website of another phone provider after that experience because they're now looking to switch?
Yeah.
And that would be kind of interesting to know. And I bet there's a lot of people in the audience that are trying to make the case as to why you just can't switch over as whole hog as people have.
Yeah, we can see that. We can see if they're searching other brands. We can see pretty much anything that would happen post that event happening. So if they were to never go back to the brand, they might delete their data and delete their account afterwards. That could be one of the things, and then we don't see it. But if they go search, if they go look at other brands, if they go on Facebook or Instagram and start commenting on the brand, we'll actually see that. Or like everything they're doing in social, we're starting to see now as well. So that whole impact and how it carries over into the real world from a negative experience, I think we're very well suited to track that, just because of all the avenues in which you would do that, right? So you're going to go on someone else's app, we'll see it, someone else's website. If you're going to go search for competitive alternatives or go talk about it in social, we'll see all of those environments and have the ability to bring that back into your insights.
That's very cool. Andrew, I know we're getting short on time here. I want to be mindful of the fact that you gentlemen have a busy day, and I don't want to overstay. But just two quick last questions for you. One, is there an example, Andrew, that you can share without naming names of a project that you thought was really a home run that you guys participated in with a client that you're like, boy, this is the type of problem they were faced with. We helped them and we got XYZ outcome. Is there like a 30-second example story you can give?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we're doing today, I would say there's like three main things we're doing today, just to cut it short. Like one is just doing regular surveys and knowing a lot more about someone. So you can engage with someone who's used your own brand or a competitive brand, and we're layering another, up to 700-800 variables on that person, so that you don't have to ask those in the questionnaire, but also you can deepen your analysis about who these people are, like immediately. That's a very easy product for us. It's like traditional CX or traditional research on steroids, basically, because you get a lot more information to bring into your analysis in that way. A lot of what we're doing we also create data feeds for people. So people that want to create their own agents or their own AI models and things like that, we're actually creating data feeds for those. And if you were to create like your own first party data, what I didn't mention is that you're also creating a Nielsen type data asset that's your own, that can be used to create your own products, that can be used to kind of fuel your own innovation, and create your own models or agents in time that's grounded on your own customers' longitudinal data over time, which I think is really interesting, and where we see a lot of this data going in time is creating agentic uses of the data, to either give you category understanding or ad understanding in different ways, and we can bring those to bear back into companies as well.
That's cool.
The most exciting thing, honestly, is the ability to maybe change insights at big organizations, honestly, that I'm most excited about. So in today's world, you have a lot of all the data that happens and is collected is done primarily by professionals that are going out and doing surveys and pulling in survey data. And we are actively working with some brands that are looking to change that dynamic, because they're concerned about, like you talked about in the beginning, getting people to take part in surveys, getting them to take part in meaningful time, separate from just the whole ecosystem of survey data being somewhat compromised from a fraudulent perspective right now. So people are looking for change. And if we can create a data asset for companies that gives them that full view of their customers or their potential customers, where you understand all category buying, not just this category in this moment, but you can put this purchase in the context of every other category that you're actually selling in the context of every ad that they're exposed to, in the context of every media that they're exposed to. You end up being able to collect less data, ask more questions of the data, change the role of the survey in that environment, and I think move you into a world where you're interacting with a data set more than you're, say, collecting information on a point in time. And that's where we see the world going, and that's where I get excited when we're doing that at bigger brands.
I could see that. That seems to be like it would touch everybody in all this work that we all do.
Yeah.
You know, I know we're as I said, we're running short here. How do we reach you if we want to talk more? I'm sure there's some folks listening either now or on the playback of the recordings that they may say, "Boy, I want to talk to that guy Andrew." How do they reach you? What's the best path to reaching you?
I'm always on LinkedIn, so probably the best way to get me. All my contact information's on there as well. So if you want to call me or email me, you can get me through there as well. So
that works. Well,
best way.
Andrew, thanks for hanging out with Michael and me here. It's good to spend this time in this conversation, guys. You know, let me just encourage you, check out Qrious Insight. Check out what Andrew and his team are doing. I think it's important work. I think it's the future of insights. It's the future of CX, and it's the intersection of the two. And I think when I say the future, I don't mean like a down the road future. I mean like a now future. You know, I think that this is the real deal, and I think this solves for so many things and fills in so many missing pieces in the kind of the as is workflows that we've all been through. That I think you guys play such a critical role in what's kind of the art of the possible here.
I agree. I think
I'm excited about it.
The world is changing in terms of CX and insights completely. And my basic philosophy is that this is the type of data that we'll collect more pervasively in about 3 to 5 years. So time to get on the bandwagon early so that you're in the front end of that train. And if you are, you're going to win, because the amount of information you figure out about your customers is way beyond that you can never ask them or even buy and connect to them or whatever, right? Like 20,000 pieces of information per month is way more than you can get from a third party or even from survey data to add in there. So that's the future.
I mean, to me, that's like somebody taking a 20,000 question survey.
Exactly. Yeah. About everything they did and who they are every month, every day, actually, because it's updated every single day. So
imagine turning the screws on your customers that hard. 20,000 questions on a survey every day. Right? That seems to be what you're offering is a way the heck better approach to that. Andrew, thank you for hanging out with Michael and me. It's always good to spend this time. And
I
guys,
appreciate it.
Again, Qrious Insight, check them out. They're doing some amazing work. I'm gonna hang out with Michael for just a minute here, Andrew. But thank you for hanging out, and we'll be back in touch.
Sounds good, guys.
So, Michael, that was cool. I think Andrew and his team are doing really important things. Coming out of the insight background, coming out of the panel space, and in your world, coming out of kind of an intersection of those now with your CX background too. You could see it. I'm positive of it. So I'm glad that you could be here to be part of the conversation as well. Michael, you and I have been collaborating on a couple of projects these days, but it again dawns on me that people may not know how to find you. How do people find Michael Allenson out there?
Thanks, Mark. So you can find me at Michael, just Michael at impactpartners.net, and impact is with an E. Impact and I called my company Impact Partners because my tagline is optimizing experiences for business impact. So what we do in the experience space, it's really important work, but I think we always have to remember that it's not the end in and of itself to our companies. It is the means to the end. We know more about how to make our company successful than almost anybody else in the company. And I've dedicated myself to helping organizations achieve that.
That's great. Guys, while we're together, as we wrap up the show today, I wanted to make just a couple of other housekeeping announcements. For those of you who have been on other shows that I do in the past, you may remember I love books about customer experience and tend to have a whole collection of them here at my desk. What I'd like to do is if there's 2 or 3 of you guys listening in now or on the recording who want me to box up a whole collection of customer experience books written by some of the biggest brained people in the space, just ping me and say, send me copies of the books, and I'll make sure that you get a whole collection of CX books sent to you. My gift to you for hanging out with me on this show. Another factor, there's a group out there in the CX world called XM Global. They're an upstart group, and they're doing a virtual conference, a virtual CX conference next Wednesday, the 14th of May, where the gentleman who runs that group has gifted me a handful of tickets for the day that would otherwise be charged for. And he's given them to me to give them to you. So if anybody listening to this show now or in the future wants to go to the XM Global Virtual CX Conference, it's on Wednesday, May 14th. It's the entire day. You could have the ticket completely free, no obligation. Just ask for it. I'll send you a copy or a link for the virtual ticket that you'll have. And then finally, I mentioned at the onset of this show that white paper that OGC Global put together around calculating the financial impact of customer experience work. And I want to encourage you, if you haven't checked out that white paper, it's amazing. They do such a great job of linking up a framework for articulating the financial impact of that work. I'll send you a copy of the paper. It's a PDF. Just, again, ask for it and you'll get it. So let me know if you want the books. They'll be on their way to you as my gift. If you want the white paper, again, just let me know. And if you want to go to next week's conference from the XM Global folks, again, just let me know and the tickets will be on their way. My friends, thank you for coming on this journey with my friends and me here. We're going to wind up the show here. We're right at the hour. And we'll see you again, hopefully in just a few weeks. Until my friends, stay well. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye now, guys.